There was a time when silence was not peace, but wait, a heavy kind of stillness that lingered in the corners of every thought and refused to let go. It was not the silence of commotions, but the silence that follows storms, when the air still trembles with what has just happened, and you are left standing alone, not knowing whether the destruction has ended or only paused. The heart grows used to noise, it grows used to distraction, to the hum of the world that fills its cracks. But when all the noise fades, you begin to hear the truth inside yourself, and sometimes that truth hurts more than any sound could. I remember the mornings when the alarm would ring, and my first thought was not of gratitude or purpose, but of exhaustion, not just of the body, but of something deeper, the exhaustion that comes when you have been running from yourself for too long. The mirror became a stranger, not because my face changed, but because I could no longer recognize the person behind the eyes. There was a time I believed strength meant never falling apart, that courage was to endure in silence, that emotion was weakness. So I built walls thinking I was protecting myself, not realizing I was building a prison with my own hands. It took years to understand that the hardest battles are not the ones fought outside, but the quiet ones within the moments when you stand between who you were and who you are becoming, and you must choose which one to let go of. We are taught to chase goals, achievements, validation, but rarely are we taught to sit with pain, to look at our wounds and ask what they are trying to teach us. The truth is that every scar holds a story, every mistake a message, and every heartbreak a chance to rebuild with deeper roots. One evening, when the city lights flickered and the noise faded, I found myself sitting alone, not in sadness but in surrender. I was tired of pretending, tired of running, tired of fighting battles that were never mine. The silence that night was different. It was not the enemy, it was the teacher. It asked nothing from me, only that I listened. So I did. I listened to the echoes of my past, to the fears that had shaped me, to the moments I had buried so deep I forgot they existed. And in that silence I realized that healing is not about forgetting, but about remembering differently. We often think life is a straight line, that success is upward and constant, that happiness is a permanent destination. But life is not a line. It is a spiral. You return to the same lessons again and again, each time with deeper understanding. You fall not because you are weak, but because you are meant to learn. Balance, you lose people not because love failed, but because growth requires space. You change not because you are broken, but because you are finally becoming whole. There are people who walk through the world carrying invisible weights, the kind that words cannot describe. They smile, they function, they appear fine, but inside they are drowning. And the hardest part is that the world rarely sees them. The world celebrates strength, but forgets compassion. It honors the finished product, but ignores the process. It praises resilience, but dismisses the pain that created it. Yet, behind every quiet soul, there is a storm that shaped them, a darkness they walked through alone. When I began to face my darkness, I realized it was not the enemy. It was the part of me that had been neglected, the part that only wanted to be seen, not as a flaw, but as truth. We all have a shadow, a collection of moments we hide from the world, our regrets, our insecurities, our fears. But if we dare to look closely, we find that the shadow is not trying to destroy us. It is trying to integrate us. It is the contrast that gives meaning to the light. I started writing letters to my younger self, the one who thought failure was the end, who believed love was conditional, who measured worth by the opinions of others. I told them that it was okay to not have it all figured out, that life would not unfold the way they planned, but it would unfold the way it needed to. I told them that the pain they carried would one day become their wisdom, and that the loneliness they felt was not emptiness, but space being created for new growth. There is something sacred about falling apart when everything you thought you were begins to crumble. You are given the chance to rebuild, not from expectation but from truth. The old self resists the change. It clings to what is familiar, even if that familiarity hurts. But growth is not gentle. It will ask you to let go of comfort, to face discomfort, to trust in uncertainty. And when you finally release control, you begin to see that the universe was never against you, it was shaping you. Every sunrise after a long night feels different when you have known darkness. It becomes a reminder that even the longest night ends, that even when the world feels cold and empty, there is always light waiting to return. The light is not always grand sometimes. It is a small thing, a quiet kindness, a deep breath, a moment of clarity, a reminder that you are still here, still capable of beginning again. I met people along the way who were reflections of my own struggle. People who smiled through pain, who gave love they did not know how to receive, who carried others while forgetting to care for themselves. I learned that connection is not about perfection, but about presence. To sit with someone in their silence without trying to fix them is one of the purest forms of love. To be seen not as what the world expects, but as who you truly are, that is healing. There was a time I believed that strength was loud, that it was about winning battles, achieving goals, conquering fears. But now I see that real strength is quiet. It is waking up on days when your heart feels heavy and still choosing to move. It is forgiving when you have every reason to hold a grudge. It is choosing hope when the evidence points to despair. It is standing in your truth even when it shakes. The world teaches us to chase happiness as if it is something outside ourselves, but happiness is not found, it is created. It is in the way you speak to yourself in the morning, in the gratitude you feel for the simple things, in the courage to keep going even when you are uncertain. It is not about the absence of pain, but the presence of meaning. When you stop running from pain and begin to learn from it, you discover that peace is not the absence of storms, but the ability to stand in the rain and trust that the sun will return. I used to think healing was a destination, something you reached and then you were done. But healing is not linear, it is circular. It will test you in waves. Some days you will feel free, other days you will feel broken again. That does not mean you have failed, it means you are human. Healing is a dance between holding on and letting go, between remembering and forgiving, between breaking and building again. In time I realized that every person you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. The stranger on the street, the friend who laughs too loud, the colleague who seems fine beneath their surface. There are stories unspoken. That awareness changes everything. It makes you softer. It teaches you empathy. It reminds you that kindness is not weakness, but wisdom. Because the moment you choose to see others with compassion, you begin to see yourself with the same grace. There will be moments when life feels unfair, when dreams collapse, when people leave, when plans fail. In those moments, it is easy to believe that you are lost, but perhaps being lost is not the opposite of being found. Perhaps it is the path itself. Maybe we must lose ourselves to discover what truly matters. Maybe we must walk through darkness to understand the value of light. Maybe we must fall apart to rebuild in alignment with who we really are. So I began to slow down, to breathe, to pay attention to the small things, the sound of rain, the warmth of morning sunlight, the laughter of strangers, the feeling of being alive in this exact moment. And I realized that joy is not in grand achievements, but in presence. Life is not measured by how much you have, but by how deeply you live it. There is a kind of beauty that only comes from brokenness, not the polished kind that the world admires, but the raw kind that shows you have lived, that you have felt deeply and survived. Every scar tells a story not of defeat but of resilience. It says you were here, you endured, you rose again. And when you begin to see your scars not as shame but as strength, something inside you shifts. You no longer need to prove yourself. You simply exist fully. Forgiveness became a turning point, not just forgiving others, but forgiving myself for the times I stayed too long, for the times I doubted my worth, for the times I spoke to myself with cruelty. Forgiveness does not change the past, but it releases its grip on the present, it allows you to reclaim your power to breathe again, to move forward, not as a victim of what happened, but as the author of what comes next. With time, I learned that letting go is not about forgetting, but about freeing yourself from the weight of what cannot be changed. You cannot rewrite what has been done, but you can choose how to carry it. You can turn pain into purpose, loss into learning, endings into beginnings. And that choice, that small shift in perspective, changes everything. When you stop asking why me and begin to ask, what is this teaching me? You transform suffering into wisdom. The same darkness that once broke you becomes the soil in which your strength grows. You begin to see that life is not happening to you, but through you. That even in chaos, there is direction. Even in endings, there are beginnings. And so I began to live differently. Not faster, but fuller. Not chasing, but flowing. Not performing, but being. I began to speak kindly to myself too. Honor my needs, to rest when tired, to say no when necessary. I began to realize that self-love is not selfish, it is essential. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot give what you do not have. Loving yourself is not arrogance, it is acceptance. It is saying, I am enough even when I am imperfect. The more I accepted myself, the more I saw the world differently. The more compassion I offered to my own wounds, the more compassion I found for others. It became clear that we are all walking each other home, all learning how to be human, how to love, how to heal, how to begin again. There will always be days of doubt, but they do not define you. There will always be storms, but they pass. There will always be moments of darkness, but they make the light more meaningful. The goal is not to avoid pain, but to learn to walk with it hand in hand, knowing it will not last forever. So if you are listening to this and you feel lost, know this: you are not behind, you are not broken. You are becoming, you are evolving in ways your future self will one day thank you for. The pain you feel now will not last, but the strength that builds will remain. The tears you shed will water the seeds of your next chapter. The loneliness you feel is preparing you for a deeper connection. Life will test you again and again, but not to destroy you, to awaken you. Each challenge, each heartbreak, each failure is a mirror asking, will you choose fear or faith? Will you shrink or will you rise? And even when you fall, remember this: falling is not failing. It is the universe reminding you that even the ground can hold you. One day you will look back and understand why things had to happen the way they did. The unanswered prayers, the unexpected turns, the painful endings, they were not detours, they were direction. Every step, even the ones that hurt, were leading you home to yourself. So breathe, release the need to control, trust the timing of your life. You are exactly where you need to be, not because it is easy, but because it is right. Every sunrise you wake to is another chance to begin again, another chance to live, not out of fear, but out of love. The quiet battle within you is not a curse, it is a calling. It is your soul asking to be seen, to be heard, to be free. And when you finally listen, when you finally embrace both the darkness and the light, you become whole. You become the story that once broke you, but now inspires others. You become living proof that even in the deepest night, there is always a dawn waiting to rise. And maybe that is what life is about. Not perfection, not endless happiness, but becoming softer, stronger, wiser, freer, becoming the version of yourself that knows peace, not because life is easy, but because you learned how to find it within. And in that realization, everything changes. The silence is no longer heavy, the past no longer haunts, the future no longer frightens. There is only this moment right here, right now, and it is enough.